and welcome back to the Argyle Financial Controller Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator, Ilana Esterich, Chief Financial Officer at American Coatings Association. We're excited to have Ilana and our panelists with us for a discussion titled, How to Successfully Manage a Distributed Finance Workforce. Welcome, Ilana, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session. As was mentioned, my name is Ilana Esterich. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at the American Coatings Association. We are a professional trade association representing manufacturers, distributors, suppliers, scientists, and other professionals in the coatings, paint, and adhesives industry. I've been with ACA for about 4 years. I've been a CFO for over 10 years, and I've been in the finance industry as a finance professional for over 30 years. So we are going to do a round robin with our co-presenters. And what I'd like to do right now is have everyone introduce themselves, starting with Jeanette.
Thank you, Ilana. Hi, I'm Jeanette Wade. I am the CFO and COO of Essentia Care Alliance. We are a $135 million not-for-profit operating here in New England. This is actually our 150th anniversary. We do work in elder services and support and also community services and supports. I have been here for 3.5 years. I have been at the executive level for about 12 years and have been in the finance arena for about 25. So I'm happy to be speaking with you today. Hope you enjoy our session. Paradise?
Hi, everyone. Morning. My name is Paradise. I am the controller over here at Wing. Wing is a subsidiary of Alphabet, which offers drone delivery through our fleet of lightweight autonomous aircraft. So the way I like to explain and envision it is if you can imagine taking your phone and ordering something like a cup of coffee or a muffin, in 5 minutes, our airplane will arrive at your location, drop your package off by tether, and off you are on your way with your goods. So I have been now with Wing for about 3 years, part of the Alphabet family for about 6 years. I've been in the tech space for about 15 years and in finance and accounting overall for about 20 years.
Wow. I have some competition here on this, which is great. Dion Norris, everyone. I am the president and CEO of Norris Accounting and Tax Services. We are a growing accounting firm based out of the Washington, D.C. metro area. We have clients in all 50 states and also in other parts of the world, mainly military. We specialize in bookkeeping, accounting, tax strategies, tax preparation, accounting work, and we're also in the government contracting space as well. A little bit of background about myself. I've been in accounting and finance for the last 12, 13 years. Former active duty Army, and look forward to having a lively discussion today.
Great. After these introductions, well, we want to basically dive right into how we're managing distributed workforces. So I'll have everybody give a little bit of an overview of your current work status and talk about what you found to be the key to success, why you were managing those distributed teams, and whether or not you were more or less able to move to hybrid. So I'll start and then we'll go round robin again. And if you do have any questions, just remember to add that into the chat and we will address those questions as we go through the presentation. We were like most people that we were sent home back in March of 2020 for 2 weeks because it was going to be a 2-week quarantine, which became 2 months, which became 6 months, and we are still kind of recovering from that. We were fully remote for 2 years, and in 2020, at the beginning of 2022, so we were remote for 2020 and 2021. At the beginning of 2022, our president made the decision to come back to the office, and he asked everyone to come back at least 3 days. And the office basically said, boo, and we aren't going to do that. And so then it was, can you at least come back in 2 days minimum and just let me know which days, and those are going to be your fixed days. And we said boo again, and we decided, okay, 2 days minimum, you choose the days, but nobody comes in on Friday. And that's how we've been operating for most of 2022. That hasn't been 100% enforceable. And we have a lot of folks who by choice come in 4 days a week and by choice don't come in at all. So we will be issuing a formal policy in 2023, starting in January, of basically work from anywhere. If you do opt to work away from headquarters, which just for everybody, already of our 85 staff members, half were already remote in 11 different states. The other half that was here in DC prior to COVID, we were coming in 4 and 5 days a week with Friday flexibility. For the folks that had desks or have desks in our DC office, as of January, if you choose not to come in, that office space will be relegated to someone else who comes in more frequently. So people who are in cubes will be getting offices, those kinds of things. I think we have a lot of old guard folks who would like us to come in as frequently as possible. The way I manage my team is intentional presence in the office, meaning if we're coming in for a purpose, whether it's a strategic meeting, it's a team meeting, it's a get together, it's something that is more efficient or effective in person, but otherwise I found that we were very efficient and effective remote. So as long as the work is being done, as a leader, I don't really care where you sit, as long as you're accessible, and we use Teams and we have a variety of other tools. So that's how we're handling it. Jeanette, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Alana. So similar to you, we went remote for 2 weeks and 2 months and 2 years. However, that was the administrative staff. Most of our staff are frontline workers, so they're either in skilled nursing facilities, assisted living, congregate living, independent living facilities, or they are drivers or doing in-home care services or other developmental disability or mental health supports. So a majority of our workforce was on the front lines, keeping people safe and helping our clients get the care that they needed. The administrative staff, similar to you, connected via Teams, via meetings, and we have reduced fixed cost by eliminating some of our leases. When they expired, we did not renew them. So we've taken advantage of that. We are not requiring people to come back to the office at all. And there is some pressure in all of our new job postings to allow those to be hybrid, if not fully remote. So we are basically seeing the performance we're expecting for people who have gone remote. And we are coming into the office intermittently for meetings, very intentional, similar to you.
Great.
Paradise?
Great, thank you. Yeah, again, same kind of back pattern, right? We all weren't sure what exactly the world was going to look like when we went into quarantine and what it was going to look like when we came out. But I think one thing that we quickly realized as a company was just how capable we were able to actually function remotely. And that made it an interesting environment to operate in, because if you kind of peel back the layers of the onion of what our org includes, it includes engineers working in the laboratory, it includes pilots in the field. We have a policy team that travels the world, and then you got finance that was able to work remotely. So all walks of life kind of trying to figure out what that next evolution was. And it almost became more of a, instead of letting folks come back to the office, it was more like asking folks to come back to the office, because all of a sudden there are all these other intangibles that became very important to the work experience. So as an employee and as employers, we had to start thinking through, what does it make sense? What makes the most sense for folks to come in and bring their best self and function and be happy and feel safe. And so there's a lot of those conversations, and I think that's where Wing was able to find the most success, because they actually asked those questions of their employees to find that balance between how do we actually approach going to a hybrid model with everyone's best intentions in mind. And I think that allowed folks to feel very vested and feel more like they were part of the process as opposed to being given a mandate. And I think that also helped with the process kind of take shape. So for my team specifically, we are on the accounting side, we are in a hybrid model right now. When we initially went hybrid, it was discussed whether it was a couple days a week, and we actually agreed as a team, because of accounting, because of the way the deadlines work during month-end close, quarter-end close, year-end close, that the dates make more sense, kind of like to what Alana was mentioning, that there needs to be some purpose or some reason for why that time in the office was going to be spent, right? Whether it's going to be collaboration or finding ways to be spontaneously innovative. That's how we would flex our time. And so we found during the last week and the first week of every month, during those close days, that was the best use of our time. That was when we were most efficient. And that's how we could better support the organization as a team. And that's worked amazingly. And again, as being part of the Alphabet family, we are given a plethora of tools to facilitate that work remote capabilities. And so it really does become, how do you replicate the spirit of being in the office while being remote, and finding that balance to kind of keep everyone engaged. So, Dion, up to you, sir.
Not to beat a dead horse, but pretty much what everyone is saying. At the most, I thought it was going to last a month back in March 2020. Long over here we are 2.5 years later, almost 3 years. So I think during this period, it has really been a transition from the old mentality of you have to be physically present in order to be doing something, and that wasn't always necessarily the case. So what we have done during this period is actually have open dialogue and discussions with the employees to see what suits everyone and what they're comfortable with. And that came, as you can currently see, I'm currently in my office today. A lot of people prefer the hybrid option of that. One, there's not the requirement that you physically have to be in the office every day, and you have the ability when you need to do things that you can work from home and have those appointments and things of that nature. So it was an open dialogue with the employees to see about how they best wanted to work and the best possible work environment for them. And it turns out the hybrid approach is best for everyone. And I'm sure a lot of people have experience, especially if you have a spouse like myself. Sometimes we share office and meetings are going on at the same time. It doesn't, it's not the most productive when you're overhearing someone else speak on a Teams call or a Zoom call. So just having that ability, as I am today, being in the office and also being able to work from home myself, is just having that flexibility is most what our employees are looking for, and how we've been approached these last 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, and it hasn't always been easy. The part of it is you have some folks or some organizations that look at leases as lost or wasted money. We're paying money for a space we're not occupying. And I know a lot of us, even ACA, we considered giving up our lease and moving to a smaller floor footprint. Some organizations have given up leases completely and have, when needed, will use WeWork or some other similar situation. We saw a lot of unintended savings on travel and expenses during COVID when everything was shut down. But then we saw spikes in other areas, the need to purchase more laptop capability, making sure that everybody had the printers, if they needed printers, if they needed office equipment. So it was kind of a shift. So we saw savings in some areas, expenses in others. And then just, our revenue sources as a trade association, we were really worried that we were not going to see dues come in because our dues are based on organizations' sales revenue. We found out very quickly that during a pandemic, people bake or they garden or they paint the inside of their houses. So we actually saw a very good year in 2021 and 2022 because we follow the paint and coatings industry. So that was interesting, but we were also forced to do things differently. So online webinars, the access to people without having to fly everybody into one location. So it really was an opportunity to shake out the house, so to speak, and find new ways of doing things and being more effective. Dion, did you find that you had any, particularly as a business owner, as CEO of your organization, what were some of your bigger challenges leading your organization? How did you overcome those?
So I think in the beginning, it was just the unknown of how long this will last. And as it became more and more prolonged, it was that shift that this is permanent. So how do we make the best of the situation? And as you mentioned, it was embracing technology, having the platforms to communicate as we're doing now. I never heard of Zoom before the pandemic, and now everyone has it. Microsoft Teams no one really used it because we were face to face all the time and speaking. So embracing those, the technology, the biggest challenge was making sure everyone is actively engaged and at the same time not overburnt and overburning when it comes to hours put in, because you are working from home. You do have the ability to wake up and roll out of bed and start working. There's that flexibility, but we found that people were burning out during especially in the summer 2020 going to fall 2020. So it was okay, even though we maybe work from home or a remote environment, we still want you to stick to a certain amount of hours that you're working per day and not answer those emails that may be coming at 8 o'clock at night from someone who's on a different work schedule than you, and actually regulating your time. So what we have tried to do is actually encourage employees to take those breaks when you're working from home, just like you would be in the office, and not overwork yourself. Because personally, from experience, I had a tendency to, even though I was from home, things come through my phone. It's just so easy to check it and constantly be working. It's having that off switch is the biggest thing, because at one point we were very productive, but we were noticing people just weren't taking breaks. So it was encouraging the workforce to have that off switch. And just from a top down, it is okay, even though you work from home or a hybrid, to take breaks. Life happens, and embrace life as it is, but at the same time, we trust you to do your work. And so far, we are seeing those benefits of not stressing not stressing on when someone is actually working, and just making sure that they are actually being productive, whether that is PowerPoint presentations or just answering emails. It's things of that nature that we have tracked to make sure people are being productive, and also just embracing, work from home, come as you are. I know we mentioned earlier, if you're coming in the office, make sure it's a point and a reason why you're coming off is not just to come in and just to say that you're here. So those are kind of some of the biggest things that we have faced as we transition to working more of a hybrid / remote environment.
Yeah, and I'd like to build off of that your comment about productivity. I think many of us faced at the beginning of the pandemic the question of, well, how do we know they're not in their pajamas, couch surfing on Netflix? Or how do we know? And maybe in the first week or two, there might have been kind of, this is kind of a freebie. But as it started to go beyond the 2 weeks and it got very serious, and we actually did have work that needed to get done, how did you guys measure productivity on your teams? And I go to my boss and to my senior management team and I said, well, did we miss deadlines? Did we not complete the audit on time? Did we not file something that needed to be filed? Did we miss any bills that needed to be paid? Did we not provide the services that we would have normally provided our membership? And the answer to all of that was no. And it was a little hard in the first, let's say, 2 weeks to 2 months to to give management the comfort that everything was happening. And the comfort was we weren't dropping the ball, things were getting done. But my organization is a pretty much an administrative type organization. How about an organization like Paradise, where there are a lot of different types of folks, people who have to be in the field, people who have to be customer facing, as well as kind of the traditional back office. Paradise, how did you guys deal with understanding productivity and measuring it and ensuring that the work was being done?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are, for what it's worth, we're in an industry that is already very regulated and very governed, right? And so I think there's a lot of that inherent rigor in people's minds in terms of deadlines and meeting milestones. And so there is always a path to get to that next level. And so our company has laid out very clear steps on what those steps need to be. And it does a good job of kind of cascading those responsibilities and milestones so that everyone feels accountable for those things. And looking more internally on my own team, again, being in the world of accounting, we are already living in the world of deadlines and month-end dates and timelines that are pretty structured. So using those as almost like a guardrail to say like, hey, I know we need to get from point A to point B. This is the time we have it in, and making sure that my team feels supported in what they need to do to get there is my job as a manager, right? And so my role needs to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, but at the same time, I need to trust that everyone can get there in their own pace. Kind of like what Dion was mentioning, is that everyone has a different way of working. We encourage folks to take time. At the same time, I'm going to trust that you know what it's going to take to get from A to B. As long as you get there by the time that we need you to, then that proves to me that you can kind of manage your own responsibilities, your own tasks. And I think to your point, Alana, it did take time to create that sense of trust at the leadership level, at the management level, because it did feel like there was a lot less visibility when folks weren't in the office. But I think by having more check-ins with folks and trying to, like I was mentioning earlier, like create that same spirit of the office environment, and just allowing folks to really kind of grow into these roles from a remote capacity, created that sense of trust. And we all of a sudden found ourselves being very capable of saying, yes, I know this needs to get done in the next week. I know this other thing needs to happen within the next month, and allowing folks to kind of dictate the path to get there, and having that proven track record kind of show that, yes, we can do this.
Yeah, I remember early on in the pandemic, this kind of friction between, well, I can see people in the office, so I assume they're productive. Now I can't see people in the office, so I assume they're not productive. And I remember thinking, well, we haven't really changed anything. All we did was kind of lift and shift to a different location. And I remember the first 6 months creating weekly Word documents for my boss, and here's everything we're doing by team. We have 6 subsidiaries, so here's what's happening in each subsidiary. And sometimes it would be 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, just with lots of detailed bullet points. And it just gave him a lot of comfort because he had data like, oh, they're doing a whole lot. And then over time, it was like once every 2 weeks, and then it was a wrap up every month. And I've since not had to do that because he now has the trust. What kind of communication tactics or collaboration or team building tactics did you have to develop, and that maybe were evolved over the last 2 or 3 years that you'll be carrying into the future? Jeanette, do you have something you want to share with us on that?
Sure. Well, I think it goes back to video conferencing, right? Here we are. In some ways, it actually made us much closer to one another. Because instead of traveling to different states to meet with different programs and departments, people could call each other up right away. So in a sense, it created more camaraderie. The leadership teams were meeting, the executive team was meeting on a daily basis to ensure the organization stayed upright. For the finance team, it's interesting because we were piloting a new forecasting process, which was meant to be published quarterly. And when COVID hit, it became a daily forecast update, And over time, the reliance upon that it got dialed back to every couple days and then to weekly. And so we established new tools to give the organization a sense of comfort with performance. And because we have so many frontline workers, for us, it was, easy to see that people were showing up, taking care, caring for people. The Great Resignation in the workforce crisis that's going on now is creating some pressure, particularly around the clinical staff that we have working. There's just a lack of resources, and it makes it really hard. But again, it goes back to communication and having procedures set up where people can connect with each other really directly. We had to stand up a emergency communication system, which we didn't have previously, because everything was done much more online. We had to make an investment in cybersecurity to ensure that we were able to interact in very different ways and embrace technology, as Dion said. And so really became about technology, and in some ways made us much closer.
Yeah, and it's fun. You mentioned the Great Resignation. We have a question, and I'll open this to everybody. The question from one of our attendees is: our local government organization is facing the perfect storm of a mandatory, fully in-person workforce. The Great Resignation, retirement, reduced or stressed remaining resources, budget cuts, and slow automation. I think we're all kind of facing that Great Resignation. At least for Dion and myself, we're in the Washington, D.C. market, and it's almost impossible to find lawyers, believe it or not, and finance and accounting professionals. They're flying off the shelves very quickly at much more inflated salaries. At least in this marketplace, I've had to increase finance and accounting salaries by at least 30% premium in order to get the qualified candidates that I need for the open positions that I had. And that, of course, the salaries are sticky, which means that I've now moved up my, the cost of my team. So, I'd be interested to hear from others on this panel about what you're facing with regard to the Great Resignation, and what, if anything, are you doing to make sure that, Dion mentioned about breaks and ensuring breaks. Are there any other tactics that you're using within your team, or that that your organization is implementing in order to just keep the employees happier in this distributed hybrid? And Jeanette, we'll start with you.
Sure. So we actually have a human development initiative focused on our employees' well-being. During the pandemic, when it was at its peak, we had wellness programs. We had a Friday game called Quarantini, where we had teams across the organization competing against one another to try to help people have some laughter in their day and keep people connected. But our human development initiative is focused on well-being of our employee base, so that we can attract and retain talent. We are also working on creating our own pipelines. We too have immigration legal services, and we have a shortage of attorneys. We're working with outside partners, so we're creating external partnerships in new and different ways to find staffing and share work. And we are also creating our own pipeline by paying for CNA training, for example, with a commitment that the CNAs, once they graduate, would come and work for us. We're partnering with colleges and universities to create an inflow of existing staff. So we're trying to be very creative, but it's all focused around partnerships and retaining our own employees.
Yeah, I sense a change in what we would consider traditional human resources, where, okay, if I give you a salary, a 401k, health benefits, we're good to go. And how we've now become more human. There's more focus on the human side to find alternative ways. And in many cases, some of these are not that expensive. But do you feel like we've had to humanize our workforce a little bit more?
I'll take that question. I would say, yes, you actually took the words out of my mouth. This has taught us more of the people side of the job, not just a position, but more of the person occupying that position. and what makes them feel good about what they're currently doing. So yes, salary increases, benefits packages lately. And not only that, just recognition is one thing that we try to do more often is recognize someone for what they're actually doing, so they have a better sense of worth and being, or I say responsibility of what they're actually doing. And that has gone a long way. Just like weekly shout outs where you can shout someone out on your team or somewhere in the company, and just having that someone recognizing what you're actually doing and is contributing to the overall success of the company has been tremendous. It was something that I hate to say we weren't really doing before the pandemic, but it's something that has become essentially part of our culture now, is recognize people for, even if it's the slightest thing, just that shout out, that extra recognition to someone can go a long way when it comes to possibly them resigning or if they're feeling a particular type of way. And also just what we found is having an open door policy where we've instilled that managers have to be more receptive and just have this open dialogue with people who may be their subordinates, where if there's an issue going on, please just have a conversation. We're having a conversation now to figure out what is the best course of action, not for your team in particular, but for that person, whether it's shifting to a different team or if they need a break from something, but is being more open-minded about what's going on in that person's life that can affect what they're doing on a day-to-day basis with their job.
Yeah, I think the little things mean a lot more in this post-pandemic world. And it can be really small. I mean, it just even hey, you've been with us for a year. I actually started with 5 direct reports. I have 10 over the last 3 years. I've gained 5. So I've had to onboard quite a few people during the pandemic, and making time when it was safe to all come together to welcome them in person was a little difficult. And so onboarding people remotely has been interesting. And it's the little touches that really make things important. At the beginning of the pandemic, I sensed a lot like Dion that people were burned out. They were really frustrated. The day is amorphous. And then of course you've got kids. At the time they were doing asynchronous learning and the dogs, and it was a lot. So I even something as a surprise showing up on your doorstep. For 4th of July one year, I sent everyone on my team a s'mores kit. And it just popped up on their driveway or on their front door, and like, hey, who is this from? And it was from me. I had a milestone birthday during the pandemic, and I got the doorbell rang, and when I opened it up, it was a margarita kit, and it had tequila and mixers, and that was sent to me by my team. So we got a little bit more innovative on how we recognize, and I still do work anniversaries. I still do the holidays. We recognize personal events. So it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but just understanding that there is a human being. I think we have, even though we are more distanced by using these electronic means, we actually were able to get a lot closer as a team. What about technologies and solutions to be more productive in a remote environment? We actually started our ERP implementation. We implemented NetSuite. We kicked off in January of 2020. And of course, March 2020 happened, and we thought, oh no, we're not going to be able to hit our go live. We actually were way more productive. We were able to do our day jobs as well as get this implementation done. And we went live on time on June 1st of 2020. And we found that it was a great opportunity to kind of shock to the system all of those things that we wished had been more automated, or if we did it better or differently, it would work out. Pre-pandemic, there was always that lethargy of like, oh, I have to go sell this to management, and there's a lot of change management. I think with the pandemic, we were able to focus on the change management. This has to happen. We have to get more automated. We have to be more effective. We had more rules on how to use Teams. My team uses Teams chat as you would getting up and going down the hallway to chit chat with someone. We actually do it on Teams. We respect the red, yellow, green on Teams. Although I have a policy of even if it's red, send me a message. Sometimes those reds are just, not serious. So we did that. We implemented an ERP. We automated our payroll more than it was originally. We did a lot more integration with our CRM system directly into NetSuite. We automated our bank reconciliations. We found ways to basically eliminate a lot of paper, a lot of manual processes, a lot faster than if we had been pre-pandemic, where there was kind of that, well, yeah, I don't, do we really need to do it? And it actually worked out strategically well for me as a CFO, as I wanted to grow kind of an FP&A component that had not existed at the association. With the automation of a lot of these manual processes, we created bandwidth on the team that allowed us to move from doing tactical work to now being able to do more analytic, strategic work. How about the others? What kind of automation did you have an opportunity to offshore? What kind of good habits did you build during the pandemic that you'll carry with you into 2023?
Yeah, I can take a step of that. And we were in a similar situation as you, Elena, where we went through an ERP implementation. It was actually more of an Alphabet initiative that Wing kind of came along for the ride for. So kind of to your point also, there's a lot of good lessons that came out of it, because I came from an environment where implementations involved everyone kind of sitting in the conference room for 8 hours at a time, doing testing and stress testing and making sure that everyone could click the right boxes. But all of a sudden we were all remote. So that actually exposed a lot of other issues that we had not thought about before. How do we communicate with each other in this new environment? How do we bubble up problems that we've seen, bugs in the system? And so that, I think, allowed us to really stress test, if you will, the system way more thoroughly than I think we anticipated. I think it created a better work product for all us to operate in. And so we've kind of taken those lessons and how, all of the wins and losses, if you will, from that implementation, and have used it for much smaller implementations that we're doing now, right? Yeah. So as we go through a smaller inventory module implementation, for example, that we're doing right now, we're taking a lot of the daily cadence meetings and the notes from those meetings and the dashboards that tell us like where we are in the process and the action items that each and every one person has to follow up on. And so I think it's allowed us to really organize the volume of tasks and create a more sensible workflow of things to do in a cadence that everyone can kind of follow and line up next to. So I think it's allowed us to create a much more efficient environment to kind of work in.
Yeah, it sounds like we've all had to mature our communication systems and styles. It's not necessarily something that we as finance and accounting professionals are known for. We're great with numbers and spreadsheets. Now we have to be very good with words, with people, with the human skills, with how we communicate. A lot more change management. So maybe a lot more information shared that we wouldn't necessarily have shared in the old days. So that's what I'll call them, the old days. But we talked about how we've become more efficient, how we've been more productive, or we feel like there has been no lack of productivity. What about, did anyone have any issues with employees who disengaged, who maybe are what they're calling quiet quitting? And how do you ensure that the high speed folks that are probably their rubber band has expanded and we don't want them to burn out? Has anyone had to deal with someone who has shrunk their rubber band and has gotten really comfortable with just kind of this is what I'm going to do and that's all I'm going to do? Anybody want to jump in on that?
Oh, yeah, I'll take that question. So yeah, we've had a couple situations like that, and I liken it to where everyone was in school at some point, assigned to a group project, and there was that one person that just wasn't pulling their weight. But now with
there's always one. There's always one.
Yeah. And now with the with technology, it's easier to track those things. So our internal things that we use, such as our portal, even when we're doing things for our clients via QuickBooks and updating their stuff, there's audit logs, and there's things that we're able to track to see who's in there and what they're actually doing. And that says a lot. So if you're assigned to a particular client and we're seeing that things aren't being done, we can go in there and verify in our respective systems, when's the last time you logged in, how long you've been logged in, and things of that nature. So it's really, technology has enabled for everyone to work from home at the same time, it's telling too, because if you're not doing something, it's going to show up and it's easily trackable for those employees who are underperforming. And there's been a situation where we've had to talk to someone that we can present the evidence. This is the last time you logged into this particular system. You're responsible for the things aren't getting done, you know, and having a conversation to correct it. And if it isn't corrected, then there's actions that we need to take to either have an employee reassigned to something else or dismiss that employee. Thankfully, we've been able to correct those situations where when they're presented with something that we can tell what you're doing, especially on our computers and everything that we've implemented because of cybersecurity, that we're able to track a lot more things now than we were prior to the pandemic. We can tell when you're not actually working. So that is one way that that we have been able to address those situations and letting the workforce know in general that yes, you are working. You may not have a set 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 schedule, but we can tell when you're actually on your laptop and actually working. And those are constant reminders that we're putting out to make sure everyone is aware that we can track these things, and we will take actions when we need to take actions.
Right. I think we'll all be flexible, but there's a limit to the flexibility. Jeanette, you mentioned that you were posting new jobs and it was going to be your job postings now have kind of flexibility and work locations. Do you think that's made hiring better or worse in your opinion? And if you have folks that are, you know, has it expanded your access to potential employees? And if you are hiring where remote is a possibility, how are you handling when you want them to come into the office and maybe they're not within commuting distance? Are you looking at, you know, travel options?
Sure. So I think our job postings having the flexibility embedded in it has just become a requirement. And I'm not sure it's actually expanded our access to other employees or the employee pool. Quite candidly, it just is an expectation now by candidates. We have had to partner with our payroll vendor and our audit firm to understand tax implications and what we would need to do to expand into other states, even though we don't operate in those other states because people are wanting to move to other states. And because of the workforce crisis, we may need to expand and allow work in other states in roles that are remote, allow remote work. So we are exploring that and making sure that we can handle that appropriately. And that is sort of a new set of work that we've had to consider because of the remote environment. And I would say from a commuting perspective, because we have not expanded to hiring outside of the 5 states that we operate in here in New England, we've had not much of a barrier because with respect to your question around how do you handle commutable area versus not, our leadership team is about our senior leadership team is about 57 people across the organization. And we have had some in-person meetings, but for the most part, everybody has not had a barrier making it to those meetings.
Yeah. I mean, with regard to travel, you know, we're 85 people. Half of our organization works remotely outside of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area where we're based. And so we are used to, when we have all hands meetings, flying them in and putting them up in a room block that we've negotiated. So that's already been part of our corporate culture. I have one member of my finance and accounting team who actually lives in Pittsburgh, and she comes in once a month for 3 days. She's working all the time, but she comes in. And when she's in, I make it mandatory for the rest of the team to be in. If she's going to be in, we should all be in. And I do cover her transportation costs and her accommodation and meals when she's in. So I think it really stems from what is the norm for your organization. But for organizations that have not had remote folks, that is something to consider about whether that would be a perk and whether the company's going to cover it or not. And if you're not going to cover it, would you really require an employee who is remote to come in? So it really depends, you know, a transportation allowance is really going to be very specific to the corporate culture or the pre-existing organization. Given the time, I actually want to just wrap up with a question, and it's been posed by one of our attendees. What are your predictions for 2023 with regard to the talent pool and for managing a remotely and distributed workforce? So I'll actually start with Jeanette.
Well, I'll dust off my crystal ball. I'm not 100% sure. I think we
You mean you don't have a magic wand?
Yeah, right. I think we will continue to see an evolution of how people work together. I don't think we're at a resting point. I don't think, unfortunately, COVID is over. And I also think the creativity, I think you referenced it a little while ago, Alana, that things are moving faster now. The flexibility that we have to be more nimble. I think that's going to continue to change the environment and continue to alter the workforce. And I like to think that that's going to be in positive ways.
Okay.
Um,
Paradise or Dion?
Yeah, I was gonna say going forward to 2023, talent pool is going to get even I guess even more diverse, and there's always jobs for each of the employees, and there's so many qualified people out there, and there's always less people than more jobs, so it's going to be very competitive still in 2023. Going forward, I'm pretty sure there's some technology or app that we don't even know of yet that's going to become a hit in 2023 that's going to revolutionize how we're doing things. So that is my one thing I'm looking forward to 2023, trying to see what we're going to be using that we're not currently using now.
Yeah, I'll follow on to that, Dion. I think that's what Wing is exactly trying to do. We're trying to find that tech that is going to allow folks to be a little bit more remote. So we're right there. But I think if I have to think about the future, I completely agree. Here in the Bay Area in California, it has always been kind of assumed that the talent is within the Valley. But I think what we're realizing very quickly is that going remote has allowed us to tap into markets that we wouldn't otherwise have thought about. So going beyond the borders of California, going beyond the borders of the US even, and finding other places to pull some of that talent from and find some awesome resources. So I think that will continue to grow. I think our recruiting team is going to have their hands full going into next year. And I think more locally, thinking about the folks here at Wing and my team especially, it's going to be about how do we make the most use out of our time, whether it's finding ways to automate existing processes or finding ways to offshore routine processes so that we could focus on more complex, more strategic initiatives. Just being able to, again, shift, not necessarily like find ways to just cut the work, but find ways to do the work more intelligently and more efficiently. Yes, exactly, and have a greater impact.
Right. And I think that expands to finance, working with our peers across the organization to find ways to cook those cost savings or cost efficiencies. So it's not really about cost cutting. It's really about spending resources and money in a way that's the most efficient. And I think it's going to 23 will continue to expand our human skills. The need to understand that we're dealing with people, not machines. We'll have to get better at communication. We'll have to get better at change management. And we'll also have to get really innovative, because the savings that we have in a remote environment in terms of travel and meetings, those cost savings, we may see those go out the door in different perks, right? So if we want to bring people into the office for an intentional meeting, we are going to have to cover transportation, lodging, meals, those kinds of things, or we'll find other benefits that are more of value, particularly as people get more distributed. One of the things that we had to face was having two different health plans, one for the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and one for non-DC. So that's two different health plans. So a perk of being able to park in our building means nothing to someone who's sitting in California. They're not driving in. So finding things that level. And what I'm hearing from some of our peers here in this marketplace is basically taking those expenses that would have been given in services, monetizing them, and then distributing and saying, here's the cash, use it as how you best need to use it. So we'll have to get much more innovative in 2023. So we actually have 1 minute left. Does anyone want to have get some parting statement?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing also. I think, the technology that has allowed us to really stay in contact with each other and have these meetings and be efficient with our time. What we've also been able to use it for the other thing as well. So making sure that people, if instead of having coffee with someone, you could still use that same meeting to meet new people. I've used it for my team and encourage them to meet new people as they onboard in this quarantine environment. So to think, again, being innovative and using those tools, again, not only just for work, but to try and get to that humanizing factor, that socializing factor, trying to create that sense of community through this remote environment.
Yeah. So unfortunately, our time is at an end and we weren't able to answer all of the questions, but if anybody has, if anybody wants their questions specifically answered, I invite you to reach out to us. I know you can reach me out on LinkedIn. I'm sure you can reach out to the other speakers on this panel through LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to help offline. Brittany?
Great. Thank you guys so much for such an excellent panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone who joined us for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you guys so much.